How can we achieve mental and emotional balance? By breaking free from the matrix. How can we live free from others' expectations? How can we set our own value system and stop following others' values as ours? And how can we realize a level of happiness that doesn't rely on others? That's what we will be talking about. How to break free from the matrix to realize our highest potential, the ultimate happiness. And to answer these questions, we need to walk through a logical deduction. Why are we not free? That is, free from the matrix. Well, because we live subject to our limiting life patterns, hopelessly hoping that they'll disappear one day. We are hoping that we can break free from limiting life patterns. Yet nothing changes as we keep finding ourselves back into these patterns over and over again. As a result, we can conclude that our emotional reactions and our defensive actions, so whatever we do, which is our integral part of our survival mechanism, are not effective tools to break free from these patterns. We have to do something else to break free from our patterns, break free from the matrix. Since our subconscious internal programming creates these survival mechanisms that are unconscious to us, if we want to rise above our patterns, these limiting life patterns, and become unstuck one day, hopefully, we need to rise in consciousness and overcome that programming that is run by our subconscious. So then, the next logical question is, how do we rise in consciousness? By definition, consciousness means awareness of the mind itself and of the external world. We can argue that we are controlled by our subconscious internal programming, then our mind is furthest away from an awareness state. That awareness of the internal and external world. So when we are not aware of our internal and external world, we are subject to our subconscious. And that keeps us at the lower consciousness level, which is subject to the matrix. So then, when we stay there, we are unable to recognize, understand, and therefore break free from these patterns that are part of our lives that keep us in the matrix. I hope so far so good and you are still with me. So therefore, what we need to do is we must become aware of these patterns first and then understand why they exist. But in order to understand, we need to rise in the consciousness level so that we are not solving the problem with the same mindset that created it. So our lower consciousness level creates the patterns, and therefore it is impossible to solve or break free from the pattern staying at that consciousness level. Then you may ask, well, what are these different levels of consciousness that we need to rise through? Well, let's start by assessing what your current level of consciousness might be, and then go from there. So, it's an illustration of consciousness. It's an illustration, a framework of levels of consciousness. The first level of consciousness is the subconscious. This is where you live in your survival mode, and you're always subject to fight or flight operating system. Here, your life is controlled by your subconscious internal programming, and you operate within those limiting life patterns which makes you feel stuck and creates confusion and suffering in your life. Because you are stuck in your life patterns, that is the source of suffering, because you do not know how to get out of these patterns. And that is why we are calling them matrix. You are trapped in the matrix. And by the end of this podcast, you will know how to rise in consciousness and break free from these patterns. At this subconscious level, you tend to be sensitive and take things personally. I'm sure you are familiar with that. The triggers. Whenever you're triggered, you are taking things personally. Your perception is governed by your internal programming. And when you take things personally, you are almost always in an emotionally reactive state and defensive against people and situations. And in that scenario, imagine where 99% of us are living in that state, and 99% of the time we are in that state. And when you think about that life seems to be heavy, turbulent, chaotic, and full of patterns that are intense and repeat frequently. Living at this level can feel like driving on a country road with lots of potholes. I'm sure you can also relate to this as your experience when you run into the challenges of life. Well, not a pleasant ride, right? Your days are filled with mental and emotional hardship, emotional suffering, emotional reactive state, and a sense of being in a permanently reactive state. You kind of sense that you're always in that fight or flight state. Well, this level can be described as chasing happiness because we think happiness will solve all of our problems. Thinking that the pursuit of happiness is what you are in, and supposedly the happiness is out there and you're trying to find it. But always you fall short, because happiness lasts very, very short, and then you fall back into this reactive fight or flight response system. You feel trapped, you feel stuck in the matrix. So let's talk about the second level of consciousness, because that's where you will be rising towards, rising above the matrix to experience that higher consciousness level, which is called self-conscious. At this level, you are more aware of your subconscious internal programming and can observe it in the context of your limiting life patterns. In a sense, this is where people talk about, all these spiritual teachings talk about becoming a witness of your life, becoming an observer of your life. Through a practice of observation, which we'll discuss in greater detail in other episodes, you can slow down your survival instincts and shift power from your subconscious to your self-conscious. You can gain deeper insights into why you do the things you do, the way you do, and why you do them in a particular way. You can even acknowledge the underlying causes of your emotional reactions and their impact on your life's decisions. It's a beautiful, beautiful state to be in. And this watchful state creates a sense of more breathing space, mental space, and ability to initiate discernment and discrimination in your actions. Can you imagine that state? And you are slowly rising towards that consciousness state through self-observation, through self-awareness. At this self-conscious level, you become more and more aware of your actions and the consequences of your reactions, learning to cause and effect of your life's decisions. Slowly, you take more control of your life and make mindful, conscious, and intentional choices that yield happier outcomes. So, as you can see, happiness does not lie outside of yourself. By choosing, making your choices intentional and conscious, you bring happiness to you, within you. You grab, connect with that happiness. So you respond to people and situations from a more mentally and emotionally balanced state, in this self-conscious state. And when you do, you realize you have more energy to cope with the inevitable challenges that come your way. You enjoy your life overall at this state of self-conscious. You have more time and energy for your hobbies and creative outlets. You are more aware of things that you haven't noticed before. I've had so many people who have awakened to this self-conscious state and telling me, I've been walking on the street for so many years, and I am just noticing this flower. I'm just noticing the energy of this tree. I'm just noticing this incredible shop that I've never noticed before. It is crazy. You are opening your eyes to a new reality, and you experience synchronistic events. They happen more and more. You establish deeper connections with others. You discover greater opportunities for authentic self-expression, to showcase yourself, your newfound self, your new you, in all areas of your life. You live more from your heart as your limiting life patterns begin to fade, gradually losing their momentum. Believe me, experiment with these tools that we share on this podcast channel, and you will start to see that limiting life patterns begin gradually to lose their momentum and intensity. When you first arrive at this level, this self-conscious level, you might experience them once a month, the limiting life patterns. Then every 3 months, as you practice more and more of this self-observation. And then, guess what? Those intense limiting life patterns will start to happen every 6 months or so. The quality of your life increases substantially. Living at this level, at this state, feels like driving on a well-paved street in a metropolitan city with clear lanes, nicely groomed trees on each side, and a smooth flow of traffic. You are in the flow, my friends. You're gonna be in the flow when you reach this self-conscious state. And this level I will call choosing happiness, as the decision to be happy is now in your hands, and you're gonna start making decisions and choices from that mental awareness state, from that conscious state. So let's talk about the third level of consciousness, which we all thrive to achieve one day. And that level is called high conscious. At this level, you are no longer in survival mode. You are fully in charge of your life. You live in a complete state of flow, where your mind and your heart work together for the right action. You constantly operate from a higher integrity point that empowers you to take actions completely aligned with your essence and the true nature of yourself. Well, take a step back here. What a state to be in. Everything is integrated. Your mind, your heart, and your body follows the connection that you strike between your heart and your mind. And that's actually the duality. That's where we are going beyond the duality. And you are sensing what we are talking about. The matrix is the duality. So you feel more authentic in this high conscious level and more in your own element. And you see many opportunities for growth anywhere in any given moment. Life is full of possibilities, full of higher potentials. When you live at this state, at this level, you feel like you are driving on a German Autobahn. Life is now a smooth ride with no bumps at all. You have a driving experience in which you connect with the road and surroundings. You will easily get in the zone. It's almost like at your will. And through this practice and state, you're going to advance along your journey without interruptions, without, or I should say, less challenges. You start to experience a sense of deep commitment, a genuine trust in life. Can you imagine waking up every morning with that genuine trust in life and trust in yourself? That confidence that everything will fall into place? You can guess, you can feel, you can sense that you rarely take things personally in that state and live completely according to your own values, with full of energy, deep feelings of love, joy, and commitment. Well, it is not so hard to guess that this high conscious level can be ultimate happiness. So, have you ever felt this kind of flow state? When we talk about these consciousness levels, we don't talk about as if they are the fully 24/7. You might go into a high consciousness level from a few hours every day or to half a day or a few minutes each morning and a few minutes every night by making higher conscious choices. So imagine that looking back at your life, have you ever felt this kind of flow state, this high conscious state? Let me describe it in more concrete terms. So now, imagine you are looking for a parking spot in the middle of a lunch hour at a very busy shopping mall. You drive in and feel a strange urge to turn left. You do so. And still wonder why. Why did I turn left? But that was that inclination. And then all of a sudden, you see another car's reverse lights illuminating. They are leaving their spot in the middle of the rush hour. No parking spot to be found. And you turn left because you follow your inclination. And there is this car leaving their spot. You immediately stop, of course, maybe a little gentle smile and think with a thought, of course. You turn your blinker on, the car pulls out, there's your parking spot. This kind of high conscious flow feels like smooth sailing, and it can happen anywhere. At work, for example. Let's take a work example. You might suddenly get in the zone during a project and everything falls into place. You have a sharp focus all of a sudden. You are more efficient. You are creating, just crazy productive. You complete your task effortlessly. How about at home? You might find laughter and joy all of a sudden because you are at ease. You are in the flow. Everyone at home is getting along with each other, and you are reading books together and poetry and poems for your partner and going out just spontaneously after dinner for a neighborhood walk. Whatever that is, you bond with your partner, your kids, and you get things done. All of a sudden, loading up dishwasher takes only 5 minutes, whereas before it felt half an hour. And guess what? No arguments, no conflicts. Achieving this ideal state, and I know it is ideal, and I'm reiterating that it is not full 24/7 we are talking about. Here and there, you might get in the zone and find this ideal flow state. Can you imagine achieving this type of state when you are stuck in your limiting life pattern? I know it is hard to say and hard to feel and hard to sense. It feels like, oh my God, how am I going to get there? It could feel like a daunting task. But that's why The Art of Becoming Unstuck is published, outlining all the steps. And therefore, I feel it's quite doable. Because these levels are not finite stops. They are basically continuum of consciousness, where you shift your position along this continuum and you see the results. You experiment with things, experiment with your responses, and you will see that the limiting life patterns lose their momentum, their intensity, and all of a sudden you shift your perspective. Again, imagine, if you will, that each of these 3 consciousness levels has a numerical range. Just for example purposes, the subconscious can be a range between 1 through 55. Imagine that this numerical range runs from 0 to 100. So subconscious 1 through 55, self-conscious 56 through 85, and high conscious 86 through 100. So now, take a step back and ask yourself this. What if life is configured to meet me at exactly my consciousness level? So let me rephrase that. What if, for example, you are at level 35 and the frequency, intensity, quality of your limiting life patterns reflects exactly that level 35, which falls in the subconscious category? What if you increase your consciousness level to 65? Can you imagine 65, which is in self-conscious level? Can you imagine what kind of life you will be living at that level? So therefore, it becomes again back to this. How can you increase your consciousness level? By becoming more aware of your thoughts, of your actions, and by understanding why you do the things the way you do. Through the self-awareness and understanding and self-observation to gather more information, you will be able to rise in your consciousness level. If you are at the lower consciousness level, you're going to be more dependent on your survival mechanisms. But that's okay. Observe your survival mechanisms, become aware of your reactions, understand your emotional reactions and the thoughts behind your emotions, and you're going to start to simply rise into a higher consciousness level. And when you do, that means that you are going to be less subject to those unhealthy, limiting life patterns, giving you more space, energy, freedom, flow, and green lights. As you rise into those higher consciousness level, you will feel more space, more energy, more freedom, more flow, and green lights to experience joy, love, and commitment. Well, if all of this is part of a design, my friends, part of a system, because you can measure when your energy is low, more limiting life patterns, more arguments, more conflicts coming your way. Don't you agree? When you do, wouldn't you think that it is part of a design? Because when you're cheerful, when you're full of joy, all of a sudden life shifts, the perspective shifts, everything shifts, your experience shifts. Become more and more observant of yourself, to become aware of your patterns, of your emotional reactions, and understand why you are reacting and why you do the things the way you do. Therefore, I am going to say again, if all of this is part of a design, part of a system of life that we're talking about, then what can you possibly do to rise out of that lower confined level of subconscious and progress towards 100? Wouldn't that be your life purpose? Wouldn't that be your purpose of life, to observe your life, observe yourself in life, and become aware of who you are and understand why you are doing the things the way you do? As you rise and rise and rise in consciousness, you will get closer and closer to your highest potential, where you're going to start to live at the highest level of consciousness, which bring your ultimate happiness. Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to sharing more in the next episode. Take care.